It's May 6, 1937, Lakehurst, New Jersey. A massive German airship called the Hindenburg is attempting to dock. The Hindenburg is enormous. It's over 800 feet long. It's filled with hydrogen, the most flammable gas known to man. Hundreds of people are watching from the ground.
News cameras are rolling. Radio reporters are narrating the landing. And then, in a matter of seconds, the entire airship erupts in flames. It falls to the ground like a burning torch. Within 37 seconds, the most famous aircraft disaster in history is over. 35 people on board are dead. A member of the ground crew is dead. That's 36 people dead in less than a minute. The Hindenburg represents the death of an era. It represents the end of the age of hydrogen airships. And it happened live, in front of cameras, in front of hundreds of witnesses. The Hindenburg was a marvel of German engineering. It was a passenger airship built by the German company Zeppelin. It was designed to carry passengers across the Atlantic in luxury. Passengers had sleeping cabins, a dining room, a smoking room. It was like a flying luxury hotel. It was a symbol of German technological superiority. The Nazi regime promoted the Hindenburg as a symbol of German power and progress. The ship had swastikas painted on its tail fins. It was a flying propaganda machine for Nazi Germany. The Hindenburg made regular transatlantic flights. It would fly from Germany to South America and to the United States. The flights were expensive and took about 35 hours across the Atlantic. But for the wealthy, it was the ultimate travel experience. You could cross the ocean in luxury without having to spend days on a ship. You could fly in comfort at an altitude of 7,000 feet. You could watch the sunset over the ocean from the highest vantage point available at the time. The problem with the Hindenburg was hydrogen. Airships needed to be lighter than air to float. Helium, the safest lifting gas, was scarce and expensive. Helium was also controlled by the United States, and the US wasn't willing to sell it to Nazi Germany for political reasons. So Germany used hydrogen instead. Hydrogen is much more flammable than helium. It's essentially rocket fuel. One spark, one electrical discharge, one flame, and hydrogen will ignite. The Hindenburg was basically a giant bomb floating above people's heads. On May 6, 1937, the Hindenburg was arriving in Lakehurst after making the transatlantic flight from Frankfurt, Germany. The weather was bad. There were storms in the area. The airship was delayed in landing because of the weather. But eventually, the weather cleared enough for a landing to be attempted. The Hindenburg descended toward the mooring mast. Passengers and crew were preparing to disembark. Ground crews were standing by to help secure the airship. News cameras and reporters were present to document the arrival. It should have been a routine landing. It had done this dozens of times before. But at about 7:25 in the evening, something went wrong. The exact cause has never been definitively determined. But the most likely explanation involves static electricity. As the airship was coming into dock, a combination of atmospheric conditions and friction from the hydrogen inside the airship created an electrical charge. One theory is that a radio antenna on the mooring mast transmitted a radio signal. That ignited the hydrogen. Another theory is that St. Elmo's fire, a natural electrical phenomenon, ignited the gas. A third theory is that sabotage by an anti-Nazi activist caused the explosion. Whatever the cause, the hydrogen ignited. The fire started at the rear of the airship. Within seconds, the entire tail section was engulfed in flames. The fire spread forward through the airship. The hydrogen inside burned with an intense blue-white flame. The airship was falling toward the ground. People were jumping from the windows. Some broke bones jumping from 20 or 30 feet up. Some were fortunate enough to land safely. Others were not. The entire rear section of the airship was engulfed. The aluminum skeleton of the airship crumpled. The great aircraft, which had been flying majestically just moments before, collapsed into a burning wreck on the ground. The fire was
The aluminum frame melted. Metal dripped onto the ground like water. By the time the fire was extinguished, the Hindenburg was nothing but a twisted, blackened skeleton. Of the 36 people who died, 13 were crew members, 22 were passengers, and 1 was a member of
the ground crew. 13 people survived with injuries. The rest of the passengers and crew, a total of about 20 people, were able to escape the burning airship with minor injuries or no injuries. But 36 people were dead. The most sophisticated aircraft in the world had been destroyed in less than a minute. The disaster was captured by newsreel cameras. It was the first major aircraft disaster to be captured on film. The images of the Hindenburg burning shocked the world. Radio reporter Herbert Morrison was narrating the landing for a local radio station. When
the airship caught fire, Morrison was still narrating. His emotional commentary became one of the most famous pieces of radio journalism in history. He said, "Oh, the humanity! All the passengers screaming around here! It's the worst catastrophe in the world!" The Hindenburg disaster was the end of
the age of passenger airships. Within a few years, airplane technology had advanced to the point where airplanes were faster, safer, and more practical than airships. Airships had been gradually becoming obsolete. The Hindenburg disaster accelerated that obsolescence. It destroyed the public confidence in airships. People were afraid
to fly in them. Airline companies didn't want to take the risk. Investment in airship development dried up. The Hindenburg was never rebuilt. Germany built a sister ship called the Graf Zeppelin II, but it never carried passengers. It was used for reconnaissance flights until it was eventually
destroyed at the end of World War II. The age of passenger airships was over. The Hindenburg had been the flagship of a doomed technology. It represented a dead end in transportation history. But the Hindenburg disaster also represents something else. It represents the beginning of the age of instantaneous mass communication. The disaster happened in front of cameras and reporters. The images were broadcast to newspapers around the world. The audio recording of Herbert Morrison's commentary was broadcast on the radio. The Hindenburg disaster was the first major tragedy of the age of instantaneous mass media. It was the beginning of an era where disasters would be broadcast live, where the world would watch tragic events unfold in real time. The Hindenburg today is remembered as a symbol of lost potential. It was a marvel of engineering for its time, but it was also the product of a poor engineering decision. Using hydrogen instead of helium was a choice driven by politics and cost. The Hindenburg died because of politics. The disaster showed that you can't build a safe aircraft when you're willing to compromise on fundamental safety for political or